What's up, everybody? It's Jamel Gibbs, your family-oriented entrepreneur. Welcome to another YouTube Live. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about LLCs today. A lot of you guys have been asking questions about how to get your LLC set up properly, but we're going to talk about something slightly different. Now, I've had our special guest on the channel before. We showed you exactly how to set up an LLC in multiple videos. And if you haven't had a chance to watch those videos, be sure to check those out. As a matter of fact, what I'll do is I'll link those in the description box for you once we're done with this YouTube Live. But today, we're going to talk about something a little more controversial, and it's why LLCs don't actually protect your assets. Now, I talked to Bob about a week ago. He helped me out on a current situation that I'm currently facing. And that's a company, well, someone trying to pierce the corporate veil through a situation that I have. I'm not going to go into too much detail on it, but at the end of the day, this is a serious thing that can happen in your business. So the question becomes, how effective is an LLC? Mm-hmm. How effective is an LLC when you're doing business? And Bob, he highlighted some things through our conversation the other day that I just wasn't aware of. So I said I need to share this with my audience, and that's exactly why we're here today. This is a super important topic, especially if you're in business. So I want you guys to pay close attention. We're going to spend some time talking about some of these different things that you really want to be aware of in order to protect yourself properly. And then we're going to talk about what you need to do in order to be able to stay consistent with your LLC in order to really protect yourself. All right. So with that being said, Bob Bloom, what's up, my brother?
Good to see you, Jamel. You've got a great group and you're a great coach and teacher. So I'm happy to talk to your folks.
I appreciate you, man. So again, why LLCs don't actually protect your assets? Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go ahead and get into the meat and potatoes.
Well, I'm an attorney in Dallas, Texas. I've been an asset protection attorney for many, many years, and I'll tell you a little story about that as we go along. But we have a law firm called Asset Defense Team, and we specialize in setting up corporations, limited liability companies, limited partnerships, trusts, and other types of entities to protect people from all kinds of things, from lawsuits, from taxes, from estate problems, such as probate. So that's in a nutshell, all the many, many things that we do.
Awesome. And now, if you guys are in any of my programs, especially within the Deal Pro Academy, you may have seen during the setup process, I usually refer everyone over to Asset Defense Team. So this is the guy. This is the guy who you're actually talking to when you reach out, and obviously he's going to direct you in which way you should walk with your real estate investing endeavors. So especially when it comes to protecting yourself through entities and stuff like that. Again, this is a super important topic, but we're going to talk about it from a different standpoint today, because a lot of people think about, hey, how, I need to get my business set up, right? But not thinking about the other end of it. I need to keep it consistent in order to really protect myself. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. Now, I know you have some slides that you wanted to share with us today. Did you want to pull those up?
I will. I'll pull those up and we'll get started with it all. And can you see that full screen, Jamel?
Yes, I can, my friend.
All right, then we're ready to go. You want me to take it away?
Yes, sir.
Okay, as Jamel mentioned, we're going to be talking about when LLCs don't protect, and that is a topic called piercing the corporate veil. And we'll explain what all that means. But I want to compliment any of you on this call, because you are learning from one of the best guys out there on house flipping and other real estate deals. And, Jamel is a great coach, teaches you how to make money in real estate, and we call making money offense, because you're trying to score. And I know everybody loves making money, playing offense, because that's the fun and exciting part of the game. But a lot of people make a big mistake and think, man, this is all there is to it. I just got to make more money and all my problems are going to be over. Well, I think y'all are smarter than that, because you know that offense is a very important part of the game, but offense is still only half the game. And the other half of the game is called defense. And that is what I'm here to talk to you about today. Defense. You've got to have a defense every bit as good as your offense, or you do not win the game. You're just in the game and getting beat. So I hope you'll all take really good notes on this call, because there's nothing for sale. Let me tell you that right up front. I'm not going to ask you to pull out a credit card. This is strictly for information, for your benefit and the benefit of Jamel's community. All right. So here we go. I want to tell you a little bit why I'm qualified to talk about this topic. I started a long time ago as an attorney in a big international law firm, and I was assigned a case, and the client was a big name that you would all know. It was a corporation who had done something wrong. They had fired some guys because of their age, and that's called age discrimination. You can't do that. Now, that's a civil problem. It's not a criminal problem. Nobody goes to jail for that. But, you know, in a civil suit like this, somebody is going to have to pay if the plaintiffs win the case. So we were in trial getting beat up pretty badly because my client really had done something wrong. They had fired these guys. There's no question about it. And it was because of their age. So they had the facts on their side. They had the law on their side. And as I mentioned, at trial, we're getting beat up. But then the plaintiff's lawyer made a really serious mistake, and I capitalized on that mistake, and we won the case. Now, normally when you win, you're ecstatic because you've spent evenings and weekends for maybe a year or two preparing for this case. But this case was different because so often it's one company suing another company, and the loser writes a check and life goes on. But here, it was people who had been injured. And these were guys who were never going to get another job at their age at the same pay rate. And as I walked out of the courtroom, I saw them huddled with their families, and they were weeping. They were saying, we're going to lose our house. The kids won't go to college. We're ruined financially. And they were, because they were suing to get their jobs back, get their pensions back, get their back pay. And none of that was coming their way. And that was wrong, because they really had been fired because of their age. And I was part of that wrong. And I decided right then and there, I am not going to do this anymore, because I went into law to help people and not to hurt people. And I had hurt these people by winning the case. So I decided I want to take everything I learned about trial work in the courtroom and take it 180 degrees in the other direction and use everything I knew to protect people from lawyers like I used to be. And so for many, many, many years, I have been an asset protection attorney, protecting people from lawsuits and from other things that I'll show you in a minute. But it's so much better, because when you have protected your assets, you have freedom from fear, no fear. You've got real financial security, and you can sleep at night because you have peace of mind knowing you've protected everything you've worked so hard for. All right. So asset protection is a really big topic. It includes tax reduction, keeping more of your money, estate planning, using trusts to reduce the risk of probate, and lawsuit protection. So at this time, we're going to be talking about number 3, and that is lawsuit protection. So let's start with the basics, because I assume most of you have an LLC. So why do we set up LLCs? And if you think about it, you could come up with this reason or that reason, but at bottom, it is because we want to protect ourselves against personal liability that we would have if we didn't have an LLC. So we want to make sure that we have no personal liability as a result of our business dealings. And the opposite of that is doing business as a sole proprietor. Now, a sole proprietor does not set up a corporation or an LLC or any other type of entity. They just start a business. They don't file anything with the Secretary of State. So The problem with being a sole proprietor is that there's no difference between you and the business. You and the business are the same. You are the business. The business is you. And the problem now is if the business gets sued, they can take both business and personal assets. You can literally be wiped out. On the other hand, if you get sued, well, why? Because maybe you caused a car accident or something. You're getting sued. If they win the lawsuit, they could take both business and personal assets, wipe out your business. This is the worst way to do business from a liability protection standpoint. So instead, we want to set up an entity because that legally separates you from the business. And now, if the business gets sued, in a worst case scenario, maybe they could take the business assets, but at least you and your personal assets, your home, your savings, your bank accounts, everything else is protected. On the other hand, if you get sued personally, because again, you maybe caused a car accident, well, they could maybe take your personal assets, but your assets in your LLCs are protected because there's a separation between you and the business. It's no longer the same. And that separation is called your corporate veil. And so we're going to be talking about how people lose their corporate veil and how you can protect your corporate veil. Critically important because the corporate veil is what makes all the difference between an LLC that does protect you versus an LLC that does not protect. And you're going to learn that most LLCs, in fact, do not protect for a variety of reasons, which I'll explain. So if they pierce your corporate veil, you have unlimited personal liability. Think about what that means. It means you're no different from a sole proprietor who has unlimited personal liability. The worst way you could ever do business, even though you set up an LLC intending to protect yourself from personal liability. So a properly structured LLC can do a lot of really good things. It can lower your taxes, it can protect you from lawsuits, and it can protect you from IRS audits. But what most people won't tell you about asset protection is that most LLCs don't lower your taxes, they don't protect you from lawsuits, and they certainly don't protect you from IRS audits. And a lot of people would be shocked at that statement. They'd say, well, why? I mean, look, an LLC is just an LLC, isn't it? They're all the same, except they're not at all the same. You know, we all know the story of the three little pigs. And they all built a house. One pig built a house out of straw, another out of sticks, and another one out of bricks. They were all a house, but they were different types of houses. And when the big bad wolf came along and blew down the straw house, there was no protection. When he blew down the house made out of sticks, there was no protection. But the bad wolf could not blow down the sturdy house made out of bricks. So there's a big difference in houses. There's a big, big difference in LLCs. And I'll explain what those differences are. Because all LLCs are not at all the same. There are at least 25 different types of LLCs. And one of the most exotic types is number 24. If you look at this list, it's called a DAO. And that was created in Wyoming close to 2 years ago. And it is specifically designed to own crypto. And the manager of a DAO is an algorithm. Think about how different that is. And the other types of LLCs are set up very, very differently as well. Because what you want the LLC to do, its purpose requires a different design and structure in every one of these cases. So there are many different types of LLCs. So stay tuned and I'll tell you a little bit more about them. So when someone comes to me and says, you know, I want to talk about asset protection, how can I be protected better? I'll say, do you have an LLC? And they'll say, oh, yeah, I've got an LLC. But when someone says, I have an LLC, it's kind of like saying, I have a house or I have a house. Doesn't tell me anything about the LLC. They could say, yeah, I have a car, or I have a car, or I have a bank account, sure, or I have a bank account. So Just saying I have an LLC doesn't tell you a darn thing about the LLC. How is it set up? How is it structured? So if you're going to build a house, you don't just go to Home Depot and start buying hammers and nails. You start with a plan. You start with a blueprint. And so we do the exact same thing when it comes time to set up an LLC. We start with a plan. So the question is this the kind of LLC you have, carefully constructed, carefully built, carefully planned, or is this the kind of LLC you have? And what I mean by this is a lot of people have been misled into thinking that you can go to any of the Secretary of State websites in this country and you can, you can fill out a form, answer a few questions, pay a fee, and presto, you've got an LLC. That's what people think. But you no more have an LLC than this is a house. This is the beginning of a house, the foundation of a house, but that is not a house that can protect you and your loved ones. This is a house that can protect you from the wind and the elements and bad guys. All right.
So the question becomes, Bob, at that point, would it be wise for someone to set up the proper LLC first before they conduct business? Or should they focus on business and then conduct set up the proper LLC?
Yeah, it's getting the cart before the horse. It's kind of like trying to build the house without a foundation. You raise a great question, Jamel, and that is you want to get the LLC set up first, because as you start business, you're going to need that LLC, not the other way around. You don't want to get the business going and then think about setting up an LLC. All right?
Good stuff.
So, yeah. Good point. Good point, Jamel. So this is not the kind of LLC you want to have. This is a one-page LLC. This is what you get from the Secretary of State. And that's the beginning of an LLC, but that's not an LLC that's going to be able to protect you. So we plan really carefully for your protection. We sit down with you. We learn about what you are trying to do with this LLC, how you want it to work. So the questions we start with are, what do you want this LLC to do? What's the purpose of it? Is it a management company? Is it going to be a holding company? Is it going to be an investor LLC or any of the other 22 types of limited liability companies out there? As I mentioned, 25 different types of LLCs, and that list is growing all the time. So another question, is this LLC going to own assets? Or is it just an operating company, not intended to own assets? We would set them up very differently. What state should we set this LLC in? Because there are states that have really strong protection in the A and B column, and states that have really weak protection in the C, D, and F column. And the bottom line is you don't have a choice sometimes. If you live in California, heaven help you, then we got to set certain things up in California, but then we compensate for the weakness of those protections by doing other things for you to, once again, compensate for the fact that in the F column, these LLCs are basically not worth the paper they're written on. All right. So continuing on. Another question we would ask is, how many members are you going to have in this LLC? Is this going to be a single member LLC with only one owner, or is it going to be a multi-member LLC with more than one owner? And this is critical because there are certain states that say a single member LLC does not provide any liability protection. And I'll show you what that state is in particular. Other states, only 7 states, in fact, have laws that say a single member LLC is just as good as a multi-member LLC. The other states in between have not ruled on it yet. And so the question is, do you really want to have a single member LLC when you're not sure if it's going to protect or not? Who are the members of this LLC going to be? Is it going to be you and your spouse, or just you alone, or your kids? Or are you going to include a corporation or a trust or another LLC? Any of those things could be members of the LLC. Who's going to manage this LLC? Is it going to be manager managed or member managed? Because certain types of LLCs require that it be manager managed. Other types of LLCs require that it be member managed. How's this LLC going to be taxed? The IRS says you can tax an LLC one of 4 different ways. It could be taxed as an S corporation, a C corporation, a sole proprietorship, or as a partnership. When would you use one? When would you use another? We have an entire course on that. Are there protective documents for this LLC? In other words, do you have a valid operating agreement? Do you have a capital account ledger, a membership registry? Do you have meeting minutes? Do you have resolutions? And many, many other types of documents that are required to have a fully protective LLC. Do you have keywords governing distributions? That means how you take money from the LLC. Is this going to be a mandatory distribution or a discretionary distribution? Is it a pro rata or a non-pro rata distribution? This is critical because it controls whether you lose your money or you keep your money. So the question is this the kind of LLC you have, carefully thought out, carefully planned, and then carefully constructed, fully documented? Or is this the kind of LLC you have, which is so often set up by people who kind of think it's all a joke? All I got to do is fill out this form and I got protection, no plan, no thought going into it. And that is not the kind of LLC that's going to protect. All right. There's a checklist for an LLC that we go through. And yet when somebody goes to an online service, they're not even aware there's a checklist, and they start pushing buttons, answering questions, not knowing what the consequence of answering it this way versus that way is, start filing with the Secretary of State. And is it any wonder that LLC doesn't protect? All right. No plan, no plan. Now, Jamel, one of the reasons that this is important and why it may be news to a lot of people is because LLC law has actually changed over time. Wyoming created the very first LLC in 1977, but no other states adopted LLC statutes until the IRS decided how these were going to be taxed. And so the IRS came up and said, okay, you can have an S corp, a C corp, a sole proprietorship, or as a partnership. Then other states began to adopt LLC statutes. Rolled out pretty slowly at first, but by 1997, 20 years later, all states had LLC statutes. But now let's talk about how law is made in this country. 2 different ways. Law is made first by the legislature. That would be your state legislature or Congress on the federal level. That's called statutory law. Common law is made by the courts, where they take a situation, specific facts, and they apply the law that Congress or a legislature created. And they apply it to a very specific situation. But the problem is that for many, many years, there was very little case law in which courts applied the new laws. And so it was still very much up in the air as to how an LLC was going to work or not work. So for many years, there were very few operational requirements for LLCs. And in the olden days, we used to say, you set up an LLC because there are very few formalities with an LLC. You can do almost anything you want. And that was true in the beginning, but it's no longer true today. Just as a couple of examples, Arizona, and I'm not implying anybody here is, in Arizona or setting up Arizona LLCs. This is an example. Arizona passed its LLC law in 1992, about 15 years after the first LLC was set up. But then in 2019, Arizona repealed the old law and came up with a new law. And the new law in Arizona says that there must be an operating agreement. Prior to that, no requirement for an operating agreement. Arizona law now requires tax returns and financial statements for the previous 3 years. And then the members of the LLC, who might be investors, have the right to inspect records, which implies you've got to have records. All right. So now there are very, very specific record keeping requirements in Arizona, whereas there were not in the previous law. Florida is another example. Florida was the second state after Wyoming to adopt an LLC law in 1982. But then Florida revised its LLC statute in 1993. But then again in 2011, Florida again changed its LLC law, stating that single member LLCs do not provide lawsuit protection in Florida. Very, very important to know. So, some guy fooling around on the internet thinking I'm going to set up an LLC in Florida, ignorant of the law, is going to set up at the type of LLC in Florida that will not protect.
Might as well be a sole proprietor at that point.
You bet. And no protection, even though he paid the money to have an LLC, wasted his money. So over time, LLC law has evolved from anything goes to very strict requirements for LLCs. So we've been talking around what is a corporate veil. So now let's talk about it. Every LLC, every corporation, every limited partnership provides a veil of protection that shields your personal assets from creditors. So think of it just like the picture, a big medieval shield. You're getting sued, the lawsuit bounces off the shield to protect your personal assets. Maybe your business assets could be seized, but not personal assets. All right. That is the corporate veil. Now, the problem is that plaintiffs will pierce the corporate veil and seize your personal assets in over 50% of cases. And when they break through the corporate veil, it's as if the LLC isn't even there and they can take your personal assets, and you are effectively, just like Jamel said a minute ago, you're effectively a sole proprietor, even though you intended to have an LLC protecting your personal assets. It doesn't protect.
So I got a quick question about that. So basically, when we're looking at those states that offer more protection versus, so you got the A and B column versus the C, D, and E, or was it whatever it was?
CD and F.
Yeah, CD and F. Right. So versus those states, are you relatively protected in the A and B column versus the other columns, or
you're
it doesn't
better
really
protected?
matter? Better protected.
You're better protected in the A and B column, but that doesn't mean it's automatic. It just means those states have stronger laws. And here's an example, Jamel. In the strong states, the law basically says the charging order, which is a lien against an asset, a charging order is the sole remedy when someone wins a judgment against a limited liability company.
And what's the charging order?
Well, a charging order basically says that, let's say, here's an example. Let's say you and I are both members of an LLC. We're partners, so to speak, but we're not in a general partnership. We own shares of an LLC together. And let's say I end up having a financial problem. I've got creditors coming after me and they sue me and they get a judgment against me, which means the remedy is that they can't come in and just wipe out the LLC. All they get is they get to take the money that I would have received from the LLC until the judgment is paid off. Now, that means you are completely protected from another person in the LLC having a financial problem. You go on and life is just good for you, not so much for me, because I had a lawsuit that I lost. But the only thing the winner of the lawsuit got was a charging order, and that means they get paid slowly over time from the distributions or the income I would have received from the LLC. That's a charging order. All right. Now, the problem in the weak states is that the law basically says, yeah, we know about the charging order, but we're going to let the judge decide whatever he or she thinks is fair. Once that happens, the door's wide open for anything to happen. You have virtually no certainty based on that kind of statute, if that makes any sense.
Makes a lot of sense, man. I got that. Thank you.
You bet. You bet. So if you want to protect your corporate veil from being pierced, courts are going to require that your LLC have three things. And the first is it's got to be properly structured. Now, we take care of that when we set up an LLC, but an example of improperly structuring would be to set up a single member LLC in Florida. Bad idea. All right. Second of all, it's got to be fully documented. And that's an example of Arizona now requiring an operating agreement, records, financial records, et cetera, et cetera. And then third, you've got to operate the LLC in a business-like manner. And that is where so many people fail also. So they fail on number one, it's not properly structured. They fail on number two, because all they have is an operating agreement, and that's not enough documentation. And then because they're not really understanding any of this, they do not operate it in a business-like manner. And I'll tell you in just a couple of minutes what that means. These are all just words that are vague at this point. So
I got one more question about. So if 1 and 2 is set up properly, you can still fail on number 3 if you're not operating in a business-like manner. So you can have all your paperwork, all your ducks in a row with number 1. You can be fully documented. Number 2, but if you just mess up a little bit on number 3, you're opening up the door to pierce the corporate veil.
You're exactly right. So we take care of number 1, we definitely properly structure. We definitely, number 2, fully document. But then to help you operate it in a business-like manner, we coach and provide guidance on what is a business-like manner. How do you operate an LLC? What do you do? What should you not do? So let me give you a little flavor of that. This is just a small sample of cases where the corporate veil was pierced. There are many, many others. But here's an example. Texas, by the way, is a very strong state for protecting you. But they still pierced the corporate veil because of something called alter ego. Now, alter ego means that your LLC lacks a separate identity from you so that you and the business are the same, which is effectively saying you are just like a what?
Sole proprietor.
Sole proprietor, where you and the business are one. No difference. And I'll show you what the courts say causes alter ego in just a little bit. Here's another case out of Oklahoma, very strong state. They pierced the corporate veil because the LLC failed to maintain separate books and records, and members commingled the LLC's funds. Now, commingling, what is that? Here's an example. Let's say you've got some money in the LLC bank account, and you've got a credit card bill to pay, and you just don't have enough money in your personal checking account. So you just write a check on the LLC bank account to pay your personal credit card bill. That is commingling, because think of this. That money in the LLC is not your money. It's the LLC's money. Now, if you are entitled to take a distribution from the LLC, that's what you do. You take a distribution, transfer funds from the LLC to your bank account, and then pay your credit card bill with personal funds. So in other words, here's the problem with a single member LLC. People tend to think of the money in the LLC bank account as that's my money. That's my money in there. No, it's the LLC's money. All right. Think of it another way. Let's say that Jamel, you and I and 3 or 4 or 5 other people are all in this LLC together. And let's say I'm the manager of the LLC. So it's my job to make sure that everybody gets paid, right? And let's say these 5 people in the LLC are entitled to 20% each of the net profits. Well, if I'm commingling the funds, that means I'm taking LLC money and just using it to pay my personal bills. And how do you think you would react to that?
I'd be pretty upset.
Yeah, you would be pretty upset. So even though there are not 5 individuals as members of an LLC, it's just you still have to treat the LLC as if it is a completely separate entity, separate from you. That's not your money in the LLC, bank account. It's the LLC's money.
And it's illegal to commingle funds anyway, isn't it?
Well, it certainly can be. I mean, let's give you an example again. Let's say the five of us are in an LLC. I'm the manager and I'm commingling the funds. In other words, I'm taking LLC money and I'm paying my personal bills with LLC money. You could sue me for theft, for fraud, for unjust enrichment, all kinds of things. So yeah, it's serious. Serious stuff. So we'll talk also about what it means to fail to maintain separate books and records. That's also coming up. But commingling funds is a really common thing. People do it all the time. And just one instance of that will give a court the basis to pierce the corporate veil.
When in reality, what you should be doing is making at least a balance transfer or wire the funds from your business account into your personal bank account, and then pay your personal bills from there. A lot of people don't do that.
You're exactly right. A lot of people don't do that, but that is what the courts require.
Yeah, if I may. So basically what we do, and not to get too deep into how we operate my business, but basically we have a tax account. Then we have another account where we pay, let's say, affiliates and, people that, have worked for our company, 1099 employees, right? So we'll have an account for that. And then we have an operating account where we have all of the bills come out of that. And then from that, we'll pay ourselves the rest.
That's right.
We might have a savings account as well. But you definitely, with these bank accounts these days, you can create buckets. And you can, as the money comes in, you can separate the buckets accordingly, separate the money accordingly within the buckets. So that way, okay, this bucket is for this bucket is for that, this bucket is for that. The rest can go into my bank account. That's a smart way of doing things, but like you said, a lot of people don't do it.
That is a smart way of doing things, and you're a good coach if you're teaching your community how to, establish those buckets. That's good. It's good.
Appreciate it.
Here's a case where they pierced the corporate veil. Why? Because the LLC did not observe formal legal requirements. What are those? Well, we could again say in Arizona, you've got to have an operating agreement. You've got to have books and records and et cetera. So that's an example. Here's Florida, very strong state for liability protection, but the Florida Supreme Court pierced the veil because there were no separate bank accounts and profit and loss statements. Think about that. I'll have people say, I've got 3 or 4 LLCs. Do all of them have to have a bank account or just the one? And the short answer is every single one needs to have a bank account. Why? Because real companies have bank accounts. If you want the court to regard your LLC as a real company, that's one indication that it is a real company. Have a bank account for each LLC and financial records, profit and loss statements. Most people do not have any of, they don't have good books. Let's put it that way. Another case, this is Wyoming. Now, a lot of people will think mistakenly, man, you set up in Wyoming, you're set. That's the strongest state. Well, the Wyoming Supreme Court pierced the corporate veil here because the LLC failed to maintain the requisite or required corporate formalities. Wow. Here's a case. The veil was pierced because the court said failure to observe corporate formalities, such as, here's the definition, failure to keep detailed financial records and minutes of business meetings and decisions. This isn't what Bob is saying you ought to do. This is what the courts are saying you need to do. And that is common law. That is the law. All right. So we've just defined what are these corporate formalities: keeping detailed financial records, having minutes of business meetings and decisions. And just ask yourself, are most people who have LLCs doing this? And the answer is no. So why do most LLCs fail to protect? Because they're not doing what the courts are saying. Now, just one weak entity in your overall structure can put your personal assets at risk, because that's where they can get through, pierce the veil of that one entity and take your personal assets. So again, piercing the corporate veil allows a plaintiff to seize your personal assets even though you have an LLC, but the court treats it as if there is no LLC. So here's a list of the types of LLCs that are going to put your personal assets at risk. A single member LLC, easy to pierce because so often people treat it like their own personal piggy bank. Second of all, set up in a weak state. Nothing you can do about that sometimes, other than we compensate in other ways to protect you better if you have to set up in a weak state. A one-page LLC, this is what you would get from the Secretary of State website. Too many people think that's a valid LLC. It's not. It's the beginning of an LLC. That will be pierced. No books, no profit and loss statements, poorly maintained records. A lot of times I'll say, do you have an operating agreement? They'll say, sure. Would you send it to me? And this is what I get. A fill in the blank operating agreement. And they haven't even filled in the blanks, for crying out loud. That is not going to be an operating agreement that's going to be valid. All right. No bank account. Once again, real companies have bank accounts. No minutes or resolutions, commingled assets. These LLCs will not protect. Very high likelihood the veil would be pierced with LLCs like this. Over 50% of LLCs have their protective veils pierced. Personal assets are seized. They provide no protection. Now, there are a lot of real LLCs out there. Here is Bill Gates's LLC with $30 billion of assets. You don't have to be Bill Gates to have a real LLC, by the way. But here's the Walton Family LLC with $90 billion in assets. So there are people out there doing it right, but you don't have to be a billionaire to do it right. Okay? A lot of fake LLCs out there. This is a guy who thinks it's all a joke, and he's setting it up in a sloppy way. He's got a one-page LLC, not going to work. He gets a free operating agreement off the internet. But take a look at this. Read the fine print. It says an LLC operating agreement is a legally binding business document. Who does it legally bind? You. That's right, you. In other words, you are legally bound to follow the procedures in the operating agreement. And if you fail to observe those, I'll show you what happens in just a minute. Because once again, a fake LLC is going to have documents like this. Now, this is a lawsuit, and I hope you never see these, but it is a real lawsuit. And after they file the complaint and you respond denying everything, you will then get a subpoena to produce your corporate documents, your LLC documents, and you have to produce them. Now, you've got only a certain amount of time. You cannot go back and backdate a bunch of stuff that you just, now create. That won't work. But here is what happens. When I was in litigation, we would get these documents in and we would go over them with a fine-tooth comb looking for what should be there and isn't. And when we found that, we knew we could pierce the corporate veil. Here's a letter from a plaintiff's attorney. I hope you never see something like this. It says, I will ask the court to amend the judgment to name alter egos, including your LLC. Your LLC is undercapitalized. It lacks documentation reflecting any corporate formalities were followed. It is being improperly used. It will not be difficult to seize your personal assets.
I got a question about that, man. So if someone were able to pierce the corporate veil, and you have, let's say, 5 different LLCs, could they go after each LLC in addition to the one that they're going after? That you're being sued for?
No, they would be able to seize your personal assets if they get through one of those LLCs. So now your personal bank accounts, potentially your home, other savings, other assets, gold, metals, crypto can be seized in that case. Now, the other LLCs, assuming that they are strong and well set up, would not be seizable necessarily. The assets in those would not be seizable. But a lot of times they will look to pierce whatever you have.
Right.
So
okay.
You want to make sure you maintain. All right.
Now, in line with that, we did an episode a little while back, you and I, on setting up your trust properly. So if you have everything under, let's say, a land trust for another layer of, anonymity, would they be able to find out and go after those things as well?
Anonymity works before a lawsuit strikes.
Gotcha.
Once a lawsuit strikes, and anonymity is valuable to hopefully keep you out of a frivolous lawsuit, because you can make it look like you don't own anything. And I've seen that work many, many times. But in a real lawsuit where there's a real injury, it's not frivolous, there's a real basis for the lawsuit, you're getting sued and you have to come clean. In other words, they're going to ask you a bunch of questions in a deposition, in written interrogatories, and you are going to have to answer them truthfully.
If you have a trust or
you're guilty of lying to the court. Perjury.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you really have to, it doesn't matter if you have a land, any type of trust, you got to reveal it anyway.
Oh, absolutely. Once you're sued, you have to reveal it, everything.
Okay. That's good to know. That's something I didn't know.
Now, everybody, I hope you'll stick with me. This is going to be a little bit dense, but don't fall asleep, because this is key language from one of the cases, and this case is regarded as the standard case that all the other courts will cite. All right, so listen to what the judge says here. He says, the failure to follow corporate formalities is important because it is indicative of the fact that such shareholder views the business as his or her own individual business, so that there is no need to, quote, go through the motions of complying with formalities. To enjoy limited personal liability for business activities, we must adhere to the formalities of maintaining a corporate entity. Faithfulness to these formalities is the price to pay for limited liability. The formalities are an excellent test of the extent to which the individuals view the corporation as a separate being. That is exactly the mindset of the courts. So these are some of the factors that you want to do, not do, to protect. And what we've done is we've distilled those into a special report that we'll be more than happy to send to anybody who asks for it. Just either call the number you see on the screen or send an email to Michelle, and she will be more than happy to send this to you. But it contains the do's and the don'ts for operating your entity in a business-like manner. That's number 3. All right. So here's the big question. Is it reasonable to think that a guy like this can spend a few minutes filling out a form to create an LLC, and that will defeat a team of seasoned plaintiffs' lawyers who know every trick in the book? They know the law. They know the tactics. They make their living suing people like this. So here's the real question. You walk into court and you say, this is my defense, a one-page LLC. How do you think a judge is going to react to that?
He's not going to take that serious.
Not at all. You know, setting up your own LLC with all the complexities is like going to a garage sale and buying a secondhand parachute. You have no idea if that thing is going to work, and you have one chance for it to work. Here's a woman who said, one of our clients, she said, I was sued for millions of dollars. I hadn't done anything wrong. After the plaintiff's attorney received copies of my lawsuit protection entities, that's the same as an LLC, I didn't have to pay them anything. Your structuring saved me $3 million plus my entire real estate career. I will always be grateful. Another one of our clients said, we have 2 of your lawsuit protection entities. We took them to our attorney, and he said they were bulletproof. So we set up bulletproof entities, and that's what it is.
And I'll say this, you set up mine, I was set up from Pennsylvania, but then when I moved to North Carolina, you set up mine for me, and they've been bulletproof. And this was over 5 years ago. So, I really appreciated that. And since then, Now, I've been telling you guys about Bob. I've had him on the channel. I believe this is the third or fourth time now, but this is something that you guys really need to consider, especially if you're going to be in business for a long time, operating your business properly. I'm not an attorney. Bob is, right? So I can tell you about LLCs all day long, but he's the guy that's going to tell you how to set it up the right way in order to protect yourself so that you won't be sued and get taken for everything. Because believe it, people out here, whether you're right or wrong, they're trying to milk you for everything you have. And if you're trying to protect yourself properly while you're in business, you could be the best business person, the nicest person in the world. People don't care, and nice doesn't pay the bills, right? People will take you for everything you have because there's some wolves out here. So you definitely want to protect yourself. And what I recommend is you guys contact Michelle, get that download, contact Bob, ask him some questions. I've had my coaching clients contact Bob just to get a consultation on how they should operate their business, and whether they use them or not, at least they know at that point what they should do, from that point moving forward. So, contact Michelle at assetdefenseteam.com. I'm also leaving a link. It's already in the description box. It's dealproacademy.com/asset defense. Check the link in the description box so you guys can get in contact with Bob and be able to, get more questions answered. Get your LLC set up properly. Now, and we're not trying to sell you anything. We're just trying to provide you with information. And this is truly based on something that I'm currently going through myself. I literally contacted Bob a little over a week ago. He said, let's hop on the phone right away, same day. We're friends. So he contacted me and said, let's hop on the phone. I'll give you some pointers. And then he put me in contact with who I needed to be in contact with in order to be able to make sure I'm taken care of. So I appreciate that, man. And I definitely wanted to have him on today to provide you guys with this same information that he told me the other day, because it's super, super important. I've been in business for over 25 years, guys, and I still make mistakes. And I'm that's why the team that you build around you is super important, because they can help protect you from being taken to the bank or being wiped out, literally. So I appreciate that, man.
And Jamel, if we've got any extra time, I'm more than happy to take any questions that people might have.
Let's do it, man. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask away. We're going to take a few minutes to see what type of questions you guys have. But ask away. I see one person, John Jacobs, asks, how much is he charging? I would say contact the office. Bob is, contact the office and get that information.
Yeah, and it's very hard to say, only because the individual states charge different amounts to file an LLC or any of these other entities. A lot of times people will ask us to fix an existing LLC, and that's a different thing than filing a brand new LLC, because there wouldn't be a state filing fee. So it just depends on the individual and the circumstances, this particular state, all kinds of different things.
Absolutely. And if you guys are in the Deal Pro Academy, I can get you in contact with Bob, with Bob's team direct. If you're a coaching client, you already know I have you taken care of. How many coaching clients have called you, man?
A lot, Jamel. But here's the thing: anyone that you refer to us, we do provide a discount for, just because you've referred them.
I appreciate that, man. So Marvin Reynolds says, is a trust a viable alternative to hold the LLCs in? I'll tell you what, I have a video on that Bob and I shot. I actually put it in the description box. If you look at the description of this video, you'll see it. But you can feel free to ask that question if you want to right now, Bob.
Well, there is a relationship between trusts and LLCs, and it depends on what kind of trust we're talking about. The most common type of trust is a revocable living trust, which is used to avoid probate. And if you have a revocable living trust, it's very common and a good idea, a good strategy to have the trust be the owner or the member of the LLC. So that is a strategy. There are a lot of good benefits from doing it that way. Not to say that you should do it that way. That's a general statement. We'd have to talk about a specific situation that's not legal advice. It's simply saying that is commonly done.
Absolutely. Now, I learned how to do that from you, just
Mm-hmm.
to be clear. So sometimes you might hear me talk about that in a video or in a video. I got that from Bob, from his knowledge. And again, I recommend you contact him to get a clearer picture of what that looks like for you personally, because everybody's situation is different. Here's
Mm-hmm.
Tanya Walters. She said, I'm in Broward, which I believe is in Florida. With an Airbnb, I need to set up which LLC?
Well, it again depends on how do you currently own the Airbnb? What kind of services do you provide in the LLC? Is it hotel-like services, very high level of service, or is it a lower level of service? Those are taxed differently, and therefore set up differently. So once again, give us a call so we can talk about the specifics if you'd like.
Yeah, and I'll take pride in this next question. Do Bob work with all states?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say yes.
Mm-hmm.
Even Puerto Rico.
Yeah, that's true.
So definitely reach out to him because it's well worth the call. Any other questions, guys? Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Click the notification bell for more content just like this. But like. It's going to help the algorithm, help more people see this video. I don't usually like to ask too much for people to like it, but I'm starting to realize that it's really hindering people from getting the information that they need when you don't like it. So be sure to like this video, and also shows that you actually like it. If you want more information, it shows that you're active on the channel. So I appreciate you guys' support with that as well. Growing community, or we're approaching 210,000 subscribers as of this video here. Looking forward to continuing to provide the value that you guys need to really go from where you are to where you want to go in your business. Doesn't matter where you are right now. All of us can make improvements. I've been doing this for 25 years at this point, and I'm still making improvements, right? Still consulting with people that I need to consult with in order to make sure I'm making the right moves. Still making mistakes. We're all imperfect, right? So naturally, we're going to make mistakes. So that's why it's best to have somebody with a bird's eye view, looking at your business the right way and telling you how to move those chess pieces around the board. So I would definitely recommend reaching out. True, I guess it's True Lieb. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but it says, what is the recommended structure for holding an LLC for generational transfer, individual ownership, trust ownership, or a holding company?
Well, again, depends on exactly what you want to do. So as a general statement, not specific legal advice, if you have a revocable living trust, then the ownership of the LLC is already in the trust. And when you pass away, the way that would work is that the trust now owns the LLC membership, and the membership would be distributed according to the terms of the trust. So for example, if you maybe 3 children, you each wanted them to receive a third of the LLC, that could be done with the kind of structure that would have the trust as the member of the LLC. That's just an example.
Got it. And Lisa says, can I set up a revocable trust after having an LLC single member for 4 years?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, that can certainly be done. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Sonia says, well, this is Sonia. She says she's looking for a 4-plex in Arizona. She's going to be giving you a call. Shout out to you, Sonia. Thank you for that. And what other questions do you guys have? Any last words or anything else that we can think of, Bob, that people need to know before they contact you?
Well, I would simply say, if you're doing real estate, you are in business, and you need to take your business seriously. You need to have books, you need to, in other words, bookkeeping to give you financial statements such as profit and loss statements, income statements, etc. It's a real business, and treat it very seriously, just like it's a $100 million company. Treat it, even though it may not be. Nevertheless, it is a real business, and the same rules apply. So take it seriously, learn what you need to do to protect your personal assets as you are in business.
Absolutely. Again, Michelle at assetdefenseteam.com, or if you want to go directly to the website, dealproacademy.com/assetdefense. And any last words for our listeners?
No, simply congratulations for being part of Jamel's community. You're in good hands with Jamel.
Awesome. Hey guys, listen, we really appreciate you spending this time on a Monday evening with us when we're recording this. Listen, we hope you benefited from this. Hope you got a lot of information that you probably wasn't aware of. Maybe you had in the back of your mind, but you got clarification on it today. We appreciate you guys really joining us, making this a fun call. Listen, like the video, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell. Check out Deal Pro Academy at dealproacademy.com/academy. And make sure you reach out to Bob's team at Michelle at assetdefenseteam.com or dealproacademy.com/assetdefense. We look forward to speaking with you guys on the next one. Leave a comment. Let me know what else you guys want to see. I know you guys are going to want Bob back, so let me know in the comments what topic you want him to talk about. I definitely want to have him back, and I want to do it more frequently because I believe that the legalities when it comes to real estate is super important, especially when it comes to how you operate and understand how to move so that you won't get yourself in trouble. So let's talk about this. Let's have a deeper conversation about it, and let's also have Bob back with a particular topic that you guys are unanimously interested in talking about. Leave a comment. Let me know what that looks like, and I will see you guys on the next one. Take care.